Picture a college dorm, you know, like bustling with students, cramming for exams, laughing together, just forming those bonds that they think will last a lifetime.
Right.
But then, just like that, everything changes. The carefree atmosphere is gone, replaced by flashing police lights.
Yeah.
Silence falls, heavier than any exam stress or roommate squabble. This is the story of a dorm room in Nagpur, where those youthful dreams collided with jealousy and rage.
It's a tragedy that reminds us how fragile life can be. It's a story that makes us look deeper to understand those complicated human emotions and the damage they can cause when they get out of control.
Welcome to CrimePod Castle's Twisted Love series.
Yes.
We're diving into a case that really shook a college community, leaving behind shock and grief.
Yeah, this case is about Rohan Kulkarni. He was a young engineering student, and his life was cut way too short. He was found dead in his dorm room, and his roommate, Ankit Verma, was the prime suspect.
Rohan was more than just a name in the news. He was a young man with a bright future. What can you tell us about him?
Rohan he was a good friend, a dedicated student, and a source of joy to everyone who knew him. He was 21 years old, full of life, and passionate about his studies. He had this infectious smile, always willing to help, and his kindness, it touched everyone he met.
It sounds like he was really loved. Such a terrible loss for his family and everyone who knew him. What about Ankit, his roommate? Was there anything about him that hinted at what was to come?
From what people saw, Ankit just seemed like an average student. 22 years old, shared a dorm with Rohan and another student, just blended in with the campus crowd. But the investigation shows something else was going on underneath. Resentment, jealousy, it was all brewing inside.
Was there something specific that triggered this resentment, or did it build up slowly over time?
It seems like a lot of things contributed to it. Witnesses said Ankit often compared himself to Rohan and felt inadequate next to Rohan's achievements and popularity.
That's tough, especially in a competitive place like college.
Yeah, it is.
It can really breed insecurity.
Right. And for Ankit, this constant comparison, well, it just fueled his resentment towards Rohan. But there's another part to this, something that made it even worse, and that was a romantic entanglement that just added fuel to the fire.
Okay, so now we're getting into the twisted love part of it. Tell me more.
So Rohan was dating a girl named Sneha Patil. And as the investigation went on, it came out that Ankit had feelings for her too.
So we have a roommate who's not only jealous of his friend's success, but also has feelings for his girlfriend. That's a recipe for disaster, especially when those feelings of inadequacy are already there.
Exactly. It's a dangerous mix. Envy, rejection, feeling overshadowed. Witnesses said that Ankit's behavior started to show this inner turmoil. There were mood swings, anger, and a lot of tension between him and Rohan in the weeks leading up to the incident.
Like everyone around them could feel that tension. Was there any attempt to address it, to help Ankit?
It makes you wonder if things could have been different. Sadly, it seems like those warning signs were missed, and the consequences were devastating. On the night of November 18th, 2018, Rohan and Ankit had a huge argument. It turned into a confrontation that changed their lives forever. All that tension just exploded that night. Their third roommate said it started in their dorm room, and it went from words to a real fight really fast.
So this wasn't just an argument, it was physical. Do we know what set them off like that?
Sadly, the details of those last few moments are unclear. But we do know the argument went from their room into the common area where other students saw it.
Wow, it's hard to believe no one stepped in, to try to break it up.
Yeah, you'd hope so, but it seems it all happened so fast, just anger and adrenaline. By the time anyone realized how serious it was too late.
What happened next? How did it turn deadly?
Ankit, he grabbed a kitchen knife in a fit of rage. Witnesses said he was just consumed by fury, totally lost control.
It's scary to think something ordinary like a kitchen knife can become so dangerous. It shows how quickly things can escalate.
It does. It's a prime example of what happens when anger takes over. Ankit was driven by jealousy, resentment, maybe even a sense of betrayal, and he just snapped. He attacked Rohan, stabbed him multiple times.
I can't imagine the horror of that for Rohan and everyone who saw it. What happened after the stabbing?
It was chaos. The third roommate, he hadn't been there, and when he got back, he found a horrible scene. Rohan on the floor, bleeding, and Ankit just standing there, still holding the knife, in shock.
I can't imagine finding something like that. The trauma must be awful.
Absolutely. He called emergency services right away, but Rohan's injuries were too severe. He died before the ambulance could even get there.
And what about Ankit? What happened to him?
They arrested him right there. Witnesses said he was in shock, the reality of what he'd done sinking in. He didn't fight back. It was like he went from rage to this terrible
Like the
realization.
rage wore off and then the horror hit him. I'm sure the police investigated everything that led up to that night.
Yeah, the Nagpur police did a thorough investigation. They talked to everyone, gathered evidence, built a strong case against Ankit. And they found that, yeah, there was that growing tension between the roommates, just like the witnesses said, that growing resentment and jealousy.
So what everyone saw, those closest to them, was backed up by the investigation? Was there any physical evidence tying Ankit to the crime?
The forensic evidence was clear. The knife, they found it at the scene, and it had traces of Rohan's blood and Ankit's fingerprints.
It's a sad confirmation of what happened. But evidence doesn't tell the whole story. I imagine the investigators wanted to know why Ankit did it.
Of course, understanding the motive is crucial. And when they questioned him, Ankit confessed. He said those feelings of inadequacy, the jealousy, and that feeling of betrayal, it all just pushed him over the edge.
A confession driven by guilt, maybe even trying to make sense of something senseless. But my confession doesn't automatically mean to guilty, right? The
Yeah.
legal process has to happen.
Right. A confession is important, but the legal system needs a trial to decide guilt and punishment. And that's where things took another turn. The courtroom became the next stage, with both sides fighting for justice.
It became this complex drama, law versus emotion.
Yeah.
The prosecution wanted to hold Ankit accountable, emphasizing that he planned this crime. They said his resentment, his confession, it all pointed to intent.
The prosecution built a strong case. They showed the evidence and painted a picture of Ankit as a jealous young man driven to violence. They talked about the tension between the roommates, the witnesses who talked about Ankit's rage, and of course, that physical evidence.
It sounds pretty damning. What did the defense do? Did they try to fight the evidence?
Well, they couldn't really deny the physical evidence or Ankit's confession, so instead they focused on trying to, well, humanize Ankit. To show him not as a cold-blooded killer, but as a young man who was just overwhelmed by his emotions.
So they were trying to get the jury to feel sympathy for Ankit, to see him as a victim of his own feelings. Did they have anything to support that?
They argued that Ankit had mental health issues, that he was dealing with feelings of inadequacy and rejection that had been building up for years.
Right.
They said he was pushed to his limit and that the stabbing was a crime of passion, an impulsive act in a moment of rage.
So they were saying he wasn't thinking clearly, that it was an emotional breakdown, not a plan. That's a tough defense, given what happened.
It was. The jury had a lot to consider, the evidence, the arguments, and they had to decide if Ankit's actions were intentional or just a terrible consequence of losing control.
It must have been hard for them, trying to balance justice for Rohan, while understanding what Ankit was going through. What was the verdict?
After thinking about it for days, the jury found Ankit guilty, but not of murder.
What does that mean?
They found him guilty of culpable homicide not amounting to murder. In India, that means the act was intentional, but it wasn't planned. They believed Ankit killed Rohan, but they didn't think it was cold-blooded murder.
So a lesser charge, because of his emotional state. What was his sentence?
Ankit was sentenced to 12 years in prison.
12 years. That's a serious sentence. It reflects what he did, but also it seems like they considered everything.
Right, they must have considered a lot of factors.
Yeah.
How serious the crime was, the defense's arguments, Ankit's age, the fact that he had no criminal record before this, and the chance that he could change his life.
It's just a terrible situation with no easy answers. It shows us that actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences can't be undone. But this case makes us think about more than just the legal stuff. It makes us confront the dark side of human emotions, the damage that jealousy and resentment can do.
It does. And it also shows how important mental health awareness is, especially for young people who are under so much pressure.
Right.
They need support systems, open communication. They need to feel like they can ask for help before they reach a breaking point.
It shows us that we need to pay more attention to the people around us. Just listening, offering support, it can make a difference.
Yeah, and it shows how important it is to learn how to deal with difficult emotions, to handle conflict in a healthy way, and to know when to ask for help.
This case is a reminder that we all have a part to play in preventing tragedies like this. We can choose to be more compassionate, more understanding, and offer help to those who are struggling.
Absolutely.
We can support better mental health resources, encourage open communication, and make it okay to ask for help.
Exactly.
We can learn from this and honor Rohan's memory by working towards positive change and building a world where we solve problems with empathy and understanding, not violence.
If you found this deep dive thought-provoking, we encourage you to share it. Let's talk about mental health, healthy relationships, and the importance of communication.
And if you found this exploration insightful, please subscribe to CrimePod Castle and our YouTube channel for more captivating true crime stories. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and as always, stay vigilant.